Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 350 or 350. So, is everyone recovered from not E3? Some big shows this year, and the video game hits keep on coming. In the oh my god, this is depressing side of things, Xbox looks to be on the verge of shutting down some of their best studios and firing those devs because Xbox has been run by incompetent idiots for the last decade. And on the equally depressing, but on a more personal level, the Steam sale has started, which is a perfect time of year to look through all the games you already own and haven't played and think, I need more of these. And I just did that, and I do need more of these games that I will never play. But you know what I always need? My guests. So joining us today are Aleks.
Hello.
And Paul.
How you doing?
Have either of you picked up anything at the summer Steam sale so far?
No, I'm holding strong, resisting so far, but there's a couple things I definitely have my eye on.
I try not to pick stuff up digitally unless I'm going to play it immediately. So no, considering.
Well, speaking of things that you're going to play immediately, a new chapter of Deltarune just dropped.
Woo!
Exactly. So Deltarune Chapter 5. Toby Fox, obviously the creator of Undertale, incredible solo endeavor that challenged everything we thought of RPGs up to that point. Very Earthbound inspired, but doing its own thing. And then a few years after that, he released the first chapter of Deltarune, which was a technically connected, but not really a sequel sort of thing. Since then, he has been releasing chapters every now and then. And yeah, this game is probably the closest thing to fan fiction bait in video games I can think of. Like the amount of, Undertale actually has like full-fledged games that are almost, if not as good as the original, it's fan fiction. Undertale Yellow, which I think you reviewed.
Oh yeah, and that I can confirm that was a really good time, and I was actually fascinated. I won't get into it now, but part of the Chapter 5 of Deltarune seems to have like a character reference that almost like accepts
that's so
Undertale
cool.
Yellow as canon.
That's so cool.
Which is awesome. Yeah, I thought that was really neat.
Well, obviously, you're a big fan of this. You gave Chapter 1 and 2 92 and Chapters 3 and 4 94. And every single time I get a chance to talk to you about these games, I feel tremendously out of my depth because I've only played Undertale. I suspect that I will play Deltarune when it comes out in, everything's all together. And to be honest, at that time, I might actually just get you to, write a review of the entire experience as a whole rather than chapter by chapter, because I imagine that'd be a very different experience. If you're willing to do that, of course. We'll see how the last few chapters go. But can you just give me a brief outline of how Deltarune works and how it relates to Undertale?
Yeah,
aside
sure.
from being an anagram.
Yeah, so I'll touch on just like the basic premise. I'll try to like avoid anything like spoilery from like Deltarune's first 4 chapters, but similar to Undertale, it kind of looks the part of a traditional turn-based JRPG, but it has those additional and kind of subversive mechanics. So battles are a mix of like a turn-based attack phase and then like a bullet hell style defense phase. So in the attack phase, you're choosing commands. You can fight, which is like a violent way to get through battles, and it's just about like depleting enemy HP. And then act allows kind of more like verb-based interactions where you try to puzzle your way through an encounter by like appealing to an enemy, and then you can spare them mercifully. But regardless of whether you're attacking or acting, after you choose your party's commands, there will be a phase where the enemy is just doing their attacks, and you just kind of have to survive with the little heart you control and kind of a little box in the middle of the screen. And they're doing their attacks, and it's like a little bit of a bullet hell where you have to move around. And if you get close to attacks, you kind of like graze against the different bullets, which boosts your TP, which you can then use to execute like more special commands. So there's a lot of variety in this. Deltarune also builds on Undertale, which was a single party member RPG experience, by introducing a full like 3-member party. So it's kind of it becomes more like Final Fantasy-ish feeling, where Undertale kind of had like that OG Dragon Quest sort of solo feel. And you can also, party members have different like specialties, like different spells that they can cast with that TP you gather, either through the grazing, through defending, or through special actions. So that's like kind of how the basic battle mechanics work. In terms of story, You're playing as a human teenager, Chris, who's living in a world just usually referred to as the light world, which is full of monsters, many of whom were in Undertale. But again, it's kind of, as you were describing, unclear whether Deltarune's events take place after Undertale, if it's like a parallel universe, or if it really is just a completely different world with reused characters, because like as you described, this fan base loves these characters so much, so why not bring them back in some capacity? And then just the overall story premise. In chapter 1, Chris and their classmate Susie find a portal to a dark world in their school closet. There you meet the third main character, Ralsei, who's a prince in the dark world. They physically resemble Chris's brother, who's away at college, but it's obviously not actually them. So it's kind of unclear what exactly is going on with Ralsei. So that's your main 3-person party. And the dark world seemed to be like a fantasy imaginary land that seems connected to the imagination and dreams of these characters, but its existence is at the same time having like repercussions in the light world. And the way this kind of chapter structure works, which supports like the gradual rollout, is each subsequent chapter takes place in a new dark world that opens up in a certain location in the light world, and like this general town where all the monsters live. These all feature their own supporting cast and villains, but the overarching story connecting them is how the personal lives of Chris and Susie develop. And also you quickly learn this overarching goal where you want to stop this figure called the Roaring Knight, who's opening these portals.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I've read online thus far, not that I put very much stock online, because everyone has their own opinion, and everyone's opinion should be given the benefit of the doubt that it's legitimate. But there has been a slightly mixed reception to this chapter as compared to others, with many people calling it like an example of the best that Deltarune has to offer, and others calling it the worst that Deltarune has to offer. How much of this would you say is legitimate, and how much would you say is just trolls with no joy who love to destroy the fabric of society and enjoyment of video games on the internet?
Wow, this is a fascinating thing to learn, because I'm still in the process of writing review. I just finished chapter 5 this morning, and generally I try to like stay away from like what the reception has been.
Damn, yeah. Sorry.
But no, it's fine. Like I already have my opinions fully formed at this point, but that's just really interesting to hear, because from my perspective, like, okay, chapter 5 is definitely like the biggest one in terms of its scope, and I would definitely agree with that first assessment where this is the best Deltarune has to offer. Like, I feel like Deltarune at its best across these first 4 chapters so far has been like the degree of gameplay variety it's able to infuse within just general pretty standard JRPG like level progression, like pretty linear and whatnot. But there's just like so much different variety, so like such a huge cast of like side characters you interact with in chapter 5, and an entire new gameplay mode, which we can get into in a sec. That like I was honestly like, if there was one thing I was a little worried about coming out of chapter 4, which I definitely enjoyed still, but it was probably that the turn-based battles weren't really becoming much more challenging. I guess that's like a consequence of this like release structure, is that like you can't like scale up the challenge too much, and that there also wasn't like a great enemy variety. But I think chapter 5 solved that well by not only making the turn-based battles a little easier to avoid if you don't want to do them, but also having this complete new gameplay mode, which, okay, I'll just get into it. It's at a certain point in this chapter, you unlock a mechanic where if you interact with certain statues scattered throughout the level, the game turns into an action RPG, like platforming side scroller. So there's the turn-based battles, and then there's just this entirely new gameplay mode layered on top of it.
Wait. Are you saying that Toby Fox is playing with genre here?
I mean,
that's okay. Color me surprised. He's never done that before.
I mean, yeah, chapter 3 had an entire like mini Legend of Zelda type game in it, so it's nothing new. But I can't imagine people's reception to that being bad. That's surprising.
Internet's no joy. Also, I by the way, when I say this, I'm not saying that this is mainstream reception. From what it seems, most people are very, very positive about the game. But there are, a certain subsection, I think, of people that will just want it to be bad for some reason. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
we know these people exist on the internet.
We know these people exist on our Facebook page. Yeah, come at me. I don't read them anyway, so come at me. Well, let's talk about we'll talk about the gameplay. I guess different kinds of gameplay in a bit, but one of the hallmarks of Deltarune is that while chapter releases vary wildly, which often usually fuels a tremendous amount of speculation about what the next chapter is going to be. How did you feel about the wait between 4 and 5 this time? I don't think it was that long.
No, I mean, yeah, chapter 2 I think came out like 2021. Then chapter 3 and 4 both dropped last year. Chapter 5, yeah, just dropped, and then I think chapter 6 has already been announced for a 2027 release. So it feels like Toby is feeling like it should pick up in like the release schedule, and I think like an annual release at this point is going to do a lot for the game, and if they can maintain that, then that would be fantastic, because more than that at this point, while like the stakes are clearly going up, I think would be a little rough and kind of like be a bit of a burden with this release structure. But an annual release to the end, I think only 7 chapters are expected. I think that would be fantastic if that could be finished in the next 2 years.
Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing. And based on the current output, I mean, we'll see. You said this one's bigger than any that came before, so chances are that, who knows if 6 will be, but 7 I would imagine would also be. A lot of loose ends to tie up there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Plus, although I imagine there are repeated musical phrases and things like that, he also needs to compose the soundtrack. Is the soundtrack here new, or is it pretty much standard from the previous chapters?
Oh no, because every chapter takes place in like a new dark world. Like you are getting like a new soundtrack. The music that plays in like the first part of this level, which is like it's really like a 3-part level, and it's just huge compared to like previous ones. There's like a garden section, there's a cliff section, and then like a castle section, and each of them have like very distinct visuals. I mean, Toby Fox has like a whole team at this point. He's no longer just like working on his own and with Temi Cheng, the monster designer. So there's like a lot more going on in like the backgrounds of these levels. There's like really beautiful like sunset horizon on like the cliffs level, tons of different music tracks, and they all rule as usual. So yeah, not much being reused other than like battle tracks and things like that. But no, you're getting a whole new experience and level of music here.
Does the music, I guess, reflect the new gameplay modes? For example, I feel like you get a certain type of music when you're playing an action RPG side scroller, like, well, let's just say Castlevania, as compared to a fantasy RPG overhead kind of thing. Do you get that vibe here, or is he playing with that kind of expectation?
No. Because the way like the statues and the 2 gameplay modes are interweaved so like fluidly, like you'll just be like exploring an area, you hit the statue, and then just the screen rotates, and suddenly you're in side-scrolling mode. So it's not like that drastic of like the segments aren't like that drastically separated. So you're getting the same track playing. But again, like because the level here is so big and divided into these different subregions, you are getting like a different track for each of those subregions. So there's a lot of variety there. Like what plays in the garden is different from the cliffs, and then the castle is like kind of this feudal Japan style castle, and you get some nice music that kind of fits that vibe. Along with like all these other kind of side characters who are each like defined through these different like colors of flowers, and then they each like have their own unique themes as well. So it's really great.
Yeah, I have heard some of the music from these games, and obviously just really, really, really good stuff. I really would like to talk about the action side-scrolling RPG mechanics, because we talked about the turn-based style, which is a evolution of the turn-based style that you saw in Undertale. What's the action like in the action RPG sections?
So I'd say they go a little more heavy on the platforming, like making it like kind of an action platformer. And you're getting like a lot of, it reminded me a bit of like kind of Hollow Knight style design where there's a lot of like pogoing on like little like bubble things. And like, yeah, you're jumping around and doing like platforming segments like that. There's also these, when you go through like these specific Torii gates, suddenly your party just starts like sprinting. So it's like a bit of like, almost gives you a bit of like a bit trip kind of runner type vibe, like where you're just automatically running and you have to do like a bit of platforming. But then there's also specific like encounters with the different flowers that you kind of have a somewhat friendly, somewhat adversarial relationship with, where you're like moving through rooms while like dodging their like attacks and things like that, or like fighting them in little encounters. So man, they really did a good job. Like it's by no means the best like side-scrolling action game I played, but the fact that it's as good as it is and it's just baked into like this one chapter's premise is phenomenal.
That's really cool. When I think about Deltarune and Undertale and Toby Fox generally, I get a very specific aesthetic. I get a very specific aesthetic in my mind, which is vaguely Earthbound kind of inspired, but obviously very different, cartoony, kind of loose, like not sketch, but like I'd say comic strip kind of thing. But what I've seen from these games is occasionally the game really does try something a little bit different and throws it at you. And I believe that's the case here. Like, let me put it this way. Are there any characters that are introduced that kind of don't look like they belong in the world?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, so usually each chapter introduces like a main, I guess I would call them like a villain, like just kind of like a defining figure for that dark world. And here it's a handsome human-looking dude named Flowery, who is introduced with like this really intricate like anime-style cutscene. And it's funny, like looking at the credits of this section, like a lot of the names that appear are just like went into like making this little introduction cutscene for this one character. And he's really funny. He's like also speaking through these like very highly compressed like vocal clips like that are reminiscent of what you would encounter in like an 8-bit or 16-bit like sports game, where he's saying like things like, "Hey guys, I found a glue," but like it's like very compressed, and it's just like really amusing for that reason. So it's just more of like Toby Fox not only like borrowing from the design of retro games, but leaning into aesthetics that came from like the technical limitations of that time. We saw that a lot with Tenna in Chapter 3, who is like a 3D render put into like an otherwise 2D space. So it's definitely having fun with that. And Flowery is a very memorable character for that reason.
Any connection to another character that's name starts with F that is also vaguely Flower-y or...
Yeah, that's the same name, but without an R. Yeah. Yeah. So
we don't need to do that. But is there a connection? Let's say. Actually, is that a spoiler? Let's not spoil it at all. Let's let the audience make up their own mind until they play it.
All I'll say is that Deltarune has been a really good job laying out breadcrumbs that make you, if you've played Undertale, start to like think and imagine more of the potential connections between the two worlds. And that's all I'll say on them.
Okay, well, that seems okay. One of the things that happens a lot as I understand it, I do know a bit about Undertale and Deltarune, and I believe you told me this, which is Undertale, the idea is free will is all. In Deltarune, the idea is fate is inevitable. Is that correct?
Yes, that is definitely kind of what's being pushed.
Okay, how is that explored here?
In some interesting ways, like narratively for this chapter, like again, you get to know this cast of like flowers who are fully realized characters, but in the real world, the light world, they are ultimately just flowers. And yeah, they have dreams too. In the Undertale / Deltarune lore, it seems like flowers have a particular power and attachment to dreams. So that is explored a lot through these characters, and also the idea that the main party's goal is to seal these dark worlds that are popping up, and you're basically ending the existence, the entire lives, the entire worlds of these different characters who, even though if they're not technically real, they've like created a sense of reality for themselves. And is that just? Is that like something that your party should feel justified in doing? Essentially, is kind of interrogated.
Okay. The game is rapidly approaching its final chapters, and I believe that this game was intentionally positioned as a much more a light adventure, kind of like the. Do you ever watch DS9?
No.
Deep Space Nine before the final arc, which was the Dominion War arc in the very last season. They did an episode where the crew goes into 1960s Las Vegas in the holodeck and they do a heist. And it's like, okay, this is our breath of fresh air. This is our lighter, fun adventure before we get into like the intense, emotional everything happening with the climax. And I'm curious, does that feel like it's the case here?
I feel like that kind of like side adventure before things really start picking up was definitely chapter 3. Chapter 3 is ultimately not super important to the overall story in terms of like what its dark world represented. Here, I think the stakes are already going up again. Because in chapter 4, a big part of the focus was like developing more of the lore around like this prophecy that your 3-character party is essentially like destined to fulfill, and asking if like that is ultimately the only way things can be. But with chapter 5, we see kind of a more of a focus on like developing the interpersonal background around these characters, because the dark world here opens up in Asgore's flower shop, which is the dad of Chris, the main character. So Asgore divorced from like Chris's mom, Toriel, and he used to be like mayor of the town, and now he's just like was seemingly impeached from that position. Now he just runs a flower shop, which is like a failing business. So the guy, despite having like a very cheery attitude whenever you've interacted with him previously, clearly has some baggage going on that's developing from all that, unsurprisingly. So Asgore appears in this dark world, and there's a lot of like focus on like what was happening with like him previous to the divorce, how that connects to the main story, and so there's actually like a lot of kind of like emotional weight behind this chapter, which was, I thought, really well done.
The fact that you finished the game in a couple of days is, I mean, there's going to be a lot more content here than I imagine that you have not seen yet, because there is usually a ton of secrets, additional paths, that kind of thing. Are you planning on jumping back in for it, or are you just going to wait a little while till the next chapter?
I mean, I'll wait until the next chapter. I think there's also like the weird route. I don't know how much you know about that, but it's basically like Undertale had its like secondary route, like the No Mercy route, where you just like can kill all the different monsters. And Deltarune doesn't quite do that, but it has like an equivalent, like secret, strange, darker route you can take. And so I still need to see what is happening there with chapter 5. So I might end up jumping in sooner rather than later, just out of sheer curiosity.
Okay. And just to wrap things up real tight, how would you sum up your overall experience with this chapter? And then afterwards, I'm going to ask you something else. So just this chapter?
With just this chapter, I would say it's my favorite chapter. It's made me extremely excited, like all the previous chapters have, for what's coming next. But I think this was just like such a strong achievement in terms of like expanding the scope from any of the previous chapters, both like gameplay wise, narratively, level design wise, and I'm just really excited.
Okay, and within the context of the previous 4 chapters, how do you feel?
I feel like it's done a good job building on it. I feel like maybe I would have expected more questions to be answered, but it seems like with each new chapter, Toby Fox just wants to lay out kind of more questions than anything. So yeah, the next 2 chapters have a lot to do if it's going to like really like powerfully and satisfyingly conclude everything that's being set up so far.
I don't know if David Lynch ever played video games, but I feel like these would be good games for David Lynch to play. Not necessarily because of the vibe, but just because of he has the thing where he likes to answer questions with more questions.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting comparison, and I don't watch Let's Plays, but that's one I would definitely pay to watch.
Yes, I really. I mean, David Lynch being dead is one of the saddest things I can think of. Period. Ever.
Yeah.
But oh my god, I would have loved to have. Oh my god, I wish he had a Twitch channel. That would have been amazing. I would have watched a live play for him playing just everything, playing Mario. That would be amazing. I'd love that. Anyway, I'm not going to try to do my David Lynch impression, though it's not bad. It would be very disrespectful here. Okay, well, now we're going to go to what I kind of would call the polar opposite of the 2D RPG style, but equally beautiful, but in like a different way. And that is the HD 2D graphic style, because we're going to be talking about the Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales. So this was announced a few years ago now. Not a few years ago. It was announced last year. Wow, they did this thing. They got this thing out quick. It was announced alongside Octopath Traveler 0, which has been out for a little while now and is currently sitting on my hard drive waiting for me to play it at some point in the next 5 years. And essentially speaking, it's kind of Square Enix's answer to, frankly, Legend of Zelda. Although they do have Team Asano have a habit of doing for example, Triangle Strategy looks a lot like, Tactics, for example, even though it's a very different kind of strategy game. So yeah, Team Asano and Square Enix pioneered the HD 2D graphic style many years ago with Octopath Traveler. That aesthetic has gotten into many other titles, like I said, Triangle Strategy, and most recently the Dragon Quest 1 to 3 remakes. And now they're applying it to this action RPG. So yeah, it was development was over the last couple of years. A lot of public demos came out to have public feedback, refine the games, as actually happens a lot with HD 2D Team Asano games. And it released just 10 days ago at this point for the Nintendo Switch 2. And this is a big shift for them from turn-based into real-time combat. Paul, you reviewed it. The review is out on the site. Just how did the experiment ultimately turn out for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I before this hadn't had too much experience with Team Asano's work, although I've been working on that recently, and it just reminded me as all
beautiful, though, isn't it?
It is amazing. It just blew me away straight, from the get go. But it just reminded me what you're saying there about the output of Team Asano recently, all the Octopaths, all the various other projects, and of course we now have the surprise of Final Fantasy Resonance coming up within the next a few months after the release of Elliot. Blew me away with the graphical style. Initially, you mentioned the demos, John, and yeah, I immediately downloaded the first demo when they announced it. Was that at the same time as the announcement? I can't remember. Or was that shortly afterwards? Either way, I kind of played a small amount of it, and it didn't really, at the time, it didn't really blow me away. It didn't really draw me in for some reason. I think it was because that demo was a little bit disjointed. And I think other people may have reacted to it differently, but having now experienced the full thing, I'm extremely glad that I was the one to sort of dive in and give this a chance to see how Team Asano can adapt their style of crazy sprite-based graphics on 3D backgrounds to an action adventure title. And for the most part, not to put it all up front, but for the most part, I think they were really successful in doing that.
That's really cool. And actually, the point you brought up before, I never really thought of it before. Team Asano's output actually kind of reminds me a little bit of how it used to be on the Squaresoft's glory days on the SNES, where it was like, wow, they're releasing a lot of games in a very, very short period of time, and they're like all bangers.
Yeah, and not in the bad way from a couple of years ago when they were releasing, I think they backed everything up. They were releasing one every day or something.
In a slightly different way, but yes.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
But no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, this kind of cycle. And there's recently been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about why younger people might not be hooking into titles like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. as much, and there's been some theorizing because of those massive release cycles. So yeah, maybe this is some kind of way to bridge that gap with this new style. Maybe we'll see something much more frequent from them coming forwards.
This comparison is going to be impossible to ignore, so I'm just going to ask it. You have a hero who is wearing a primary color outfit who has a fairy friend. So how does this compare to 2D Legend of Zelda games? Or is it a little bit more like a mana game?
You know, it's actually the thing that, and I know I said Zelda quite a lot in my review, and yes, there are some really, really obvious Zelda vibes.
It's really hard to not do it, though, right?
It is really hard not to. You've got some, the clear things like the shards of life, I think they're called, which is basically pieces of the heart, and which are these lovely little temples scattered all throughout the map. You pop in, do usually a relatively simple puzzle, and I feel that's the vibe and the pacing that they're going for, not something horrendously complicated that's going to melt your brain. It's just kind of pop in, solve something, get a little bit of satisfaction, a little bit of Pavlov's dog response kind of thing going on, and it's great. It encourages you to keep going. But yeah, really similar to Zelda. But the feeling that I got most from it, much more than that, was as I mentioned in the review, that kind of early Ys style game, Ys Origin kind of experience, because there's a reward for every time you beat something, and you do get surrounded. And I know that happens in Zelda, but much more than that, you kind of get mobbed. Every time you kill things, sometimes they drop bonuses that increase strength, increase your stats and things. So there's an encouragement to keep going, keep that pace up and up and up and up in a way that is much more reminiscent of Ys Origins than it is of Zelda. It's all about that kind of frenetic action that really suits this kind of title. It suits the kind of weaponry they give you. And yeah, it feels like that's more what they're going for than the Zelda vibe, to be honest.
As long as they avoid saying something like, I don't know, the quad power or something like that, I think they're legally distinct enough to pass.
Yeah, just about.
It's not like Zelda has a monopoly on action adventure RPGs. And I mean, arguably, again, Square Enix owns the mana games. So there's that as well.
Yeah, there's a mana feel to it, as you said, a little bit, in the sense that with the weaponry, you have a bit like I mentioned the Shards of the Heart temples. You have the weapons and improved weapons are scattered throughout the map as well. When you pick up, and I don't think I mentioned this in the review, to be honest, but when you pick up better versions of those weapons, you can start doing charges. So very mana-y in that way. You don't have the defining aspect of Secret of Mana, I suppose, being, for me anyway, the multiplayer aspect. That's not really there, except it is there is a small aspect of that there. I suppose we can probably get into that in a bit, though.
Yeah. In terms of the plot, the thing that really grabbed me, because I'm a sucker for it, is time travel. And Square Enix, let's just say, goes to this well often. And I'm not just talking about in Chrono Trigger. It's like, all right, there's a lot of time travel in Dragon Quest games. There is obviously a lot of time travel in the Final Fantasy series. There are, I guess, actually, they own Life is Strange, don't they? There's Bravely Default, which is kind of time travel. So I'm just curious, from what I have read, the closest analogy here would be Chrono Trigger, because you have 4 different periods in the same land. I'm curious what it's like to travel between those periods and the similarities and differences of those settings.
Yeah, that was a really big part of the appeal for me. Not something I think I was fully aware of before I started up. And it works. It really does work to a certain degree within the narrative.
I imagine it helps with development, because they don't have to do very much work. They could just build one dungeon and then change a few things over time. Yay, asset reuse. Giant fan of asset reuse.
Yeah. It's that's a big part of it. I'd say maybe that's one of the less successful things. I really like the main settlement. You see it throughout the ages. You start in the sort of modern age, and then you go backwards through an era of basically the era of just before is kind of an era when everything was destroyed. The era just before that is an era of high magic, like sort of techno magic kind of city. And the very earliest point is kind of like primal man fighting off against humanity's greatest enemy, which are these beast tribes, basically. And that works really well. You see these different settlements as you travel between them, and later on, it's not huge spoilers to say you get the ability to travel between each era, and it's really nice seeing the way they interweave with each other, seeing things kind of be built up and then be destroyed between them. Every now and again, some of the side quests, and I do like the side quests because they're the type of side quests where, yeah, you're going to get your standard, a lot of them are your standard fetch questy type thing, but at least they're making an effort to make them interesting, build them into the story, expand the world, give you something to hang on to with them. And sometimes they'll weave that through the time journey as well, which I really love. You know, you do something in the past, it impacts something in the future, that sort of thing.
That
really,
kind of cause
really
and
love
effect
that.
is actually probably one of my favorite narrative devices. I adore it. Just putting something in motion, traveling forward in time, and seeing. It's the classic robo planning a forest is some of my favorite moments in Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, and you know, we'll ignore all the kind of bootstrap paradox type things or anything.
Really.
Don't think about it too hard, basically. But yeah, as you said, the asset reuse, like everything outside of the main settlement, tends to not really change that much. As you go between the different eras, it's pretty much the same. What it all really boils down to is in one dungeon, in one particular era, you'll be able to clear out the entire thing. In another era, you'll go there and it's like a couple of different chests for some stuff, but you won't be able to go quite as far into it. It's like, you'll be effectively told, well, maybe you should try this in a different time period. I don't want to be overly negative about it because, as I said, it's still got that kind of satisfaction of clearing things out, finding new stuff. But it's a definite weakness that if they do an Elliot 2, I'd like to see the time travel aspect be more embedded into the entire world rather than just one small part of it, I would say.
Let's talk about the combat for a sec, because this is the first time Team Asano has done action RPG combat, whereas previously they were pretty much grid-based combat and triangle strategy, and certainly a fantastic form of turn-based strategy, real in the Octopath Traveler games. So we're just going to use Zelda because why not? Zelda, you have a sword in one hand, you have an item in the other hand. Oftentimes it's a tool, sometimes it's a weapon like a boomerang. How does it compare here?
Yeah, there's definite similarities. Essentially, you've got two buttons that you can map two weapons to. And those weapons, some of them extremely familiar from the Zelda territory, like bombs, arrows, things like that, swords, spears. You also have some interesting weaponry like a sickle and chain, which is kind of like a thing that I loved. I used for most of my journey. It kind of spins around your head and whacks enemies within a kind of radial circle.
So this is heading a little bit more towards the mana side of things, where you have all the different weapons.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And you can, because you can map any of the weapons onto those two, you can have any sort of combination, 2 melee weapons, 1 melee, or I tended to gravitate towards the 1 melee, 1 ranged. So you have like boomerang, bow, bomb, basically.
That seems logical.
Yeah. With that kind of, as I said, ease style frenetic combat, it works really well. It's really satisfying to pull off. But as I mentioned in my review, there is a tendency maybe you can get a little bit too comfortable. At least that's me, with one particular style. And as there's not always too much of an impetus to switch between the weaponry, particularly in dungeons and things like that, you're not really forced to switch. Like for instance, enemies they're not like an enemy is weak to a spear and strong to a sword or anything. There's nothing like that really. So you can just fall into one type of combat style. The combat styles are really, really customizable. Because there is a system in it where you every single creature you drops this resource called Magicite, and you can use the Magicite to buy Magicite crystals. You use those to customize your weaponry, give them different abilities. And the thing it weirdly reminded me of a bit was Clair Obscur, with that total, you have like 20 points or something, and each Magicite crystal, which will do something like spin your sickle, it throws fireballs all over the place. That'll be worth a certain numerical value. So you can put a limited amount of those Magicite crystals onto your weapon, but in lots of different combinations. And you can do that with each of your weapons that you might have. And as you can probably imagine, just like Clair Obscur, really, you can invent interesting ways of making interact with each other. So, like, as I said, maybe your sickle sets people on fire. Maybe you have another ability on a different weapon that says you do double damage to creatures that are on fire. That sort of thing. And it's generally, I suppose the bottom line is it is a lot of fun, enough to keep you going through it, even if the enemy type, and I've seen this, not just I mentioned it in my review, but I've seen it elsewhere as well. The enemy types are a little limited. That's an unfortunate truth. Throughout all of the time periods and throughout the map, you're going to get, I couldn't swear on it, but it's maybe like 5 different types. They're all these beastmen tribes, like elephants, chickens, frogs, things like that. And they don't vary too much. Some reskins, there might be a different color in a different area, but yeah, you'll be very, very used to them by the time you reach the end. Not a hugely long game, but yeah, even by the 30, 40 hour mark, you might have had your fill by that point. I'll just say that.
I imagine that another major point of this game, in terms of both maybe combat, but also puzzle solving, is the fact that you have a fairy friend, which I'm assuming at no point they go, hey, listen, but generally fairy friends do not have what I would call the best reputation in action RPGs. They're irritating as hell. How is this fairy friend?
I think I've got massive tolerance for it. I think it must just be me, but I thought she was great. You start off with Princess Huria, who's the princess of this kingdom who can't leave her castle because she's as I said, the age of safekeeping. She creates the safekeeping. She creates the spell that keeps the beast tribes out, so she can never leave. But she finds a way to travel with you, kind of like not physically. And for the first part of the game, she is your companion. Her ability, she's like the training wheels, basically. Her ability is you just hit a button and you heal instantly on a cooldown timer, so it's not infinite. But so that's kind of nice. She eventually is replaced by Faye the fairy, and I find it kind of charming. It's like the relationship they have with each other. It's this kind of cute buddy thing. Not everyone is going to feel that way. I know, I'm absolutely certain of that. But there is an option, which I didn't use myself, but there is an option to make her less chatty. So I can see she does tend to repeat her comments sometimes. So I can see why some people might find that quite valuable. She's always pointing out, where you might want to go, what you might want to do. That sort of thing. So she
literally is a fairy in the video game. She is the fairy in the video game.
She's that one. She's that one.
But she's living up to the reputation of.
She is. But at the same time, I found it really nice. Like her portrait in the bottom left hand of the screen. No one can see her except for Elliot, essentially. So while you're having conversations, and that's a big part of this, it's a little bit different to Zelda, more similar to Ys, I suppose, even more so than the early Ys games. But there's a lot of talking in this. There's a lot of very JRPG-ish chatting and dialogue, a lot of story. Is it the most complicated story in the world? Probably not, but there's a lot of it there. And Faye will react to all of it. As Elliot's talking to people, you'll see her face kind of like grimace or smile or something like that. And I personally found that quite charming. I think it really added to the atmosphere.
Let's talk about boss fights for a second, because boss fights are kind of a major part of this sort of game. And in this, generally speaking, in the Zelda formula, boss fights tend to go, you find an item in the dungeon, that item is necessary to beat the boss, you have to pattern match the boss, and then you beat the boss and you get the heart shard. What is the structure here about beating bosses?
Yeah, there is an element of that. I'm just thinking back to you've got some really traditional bomb-based bosses. I think that's the thing that sticks out to me the most. Probably there's a couple that you have to beat with the bombs. I don't think that's going to ruin anyone's experience for me to praise that to you. That you'd probably figure that out quite quickly. It's the sort of thing where you've got to throw the bomb through the shield and break the shield. Aside from that, though, I don't think there's too many where you have to specifically use a specific weapon. So they're not really structured like that. I really enjoyed them. They are, again, a little repetitive. You see one boss, if you do any of the side content, you're going to see that boss several times over again. I know there's several different difficulty levels. I pretty much just hit it up on the normal one, and on the normal difficulty level, it's not. I think I could probably even have turned it up a bit. It's not teeth grinding. It's not like skinny your teeth type stuff.
You're not dealing with Souls. It's not a Souls-like.
Not anywhere like a Souls-like, and not even.
And thank God for that.
Oh, for me. Yeah, I know.
Well, that wasn't a hit at you. That was a hit for me too.
No, I know, but yeah, for me, it's not my speciality. Yeah. So yeah, it's nowhere near that sort of level, but they are really fun. There's a couple of them with some interesting gimmicks. Yeah, they're inventive and different enough that I did really enjoy them. Do I think that people are going to be putting again? It's really difficult because I don't want to come down too negatively on the game, which overall but
you gave it an 88.
I did, and I gave it a choice, which I really do believe, because at the end of it, I feel I've had a fantastic experience with this. But is anyone is anyone going to put this up at the top ranks of the best boss fights ever with this type of game? Probably not. But will you have a really good time? I think you probably will.
Well, I am really glad that you enjoyed this game. It's kind of the look and the general feel, and certainly the time travel is just bait for me because they're all things I really, really like. And I'm kind of glad that you've gotten into this is your this style of game and this look and everything. It sounds like a good entry point for it.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a great jumping off point for anyone, assuming that you don't want a turn-based game, because obviously this is not that. But if you've got a casual interest, you played the demo or you've seen some of it, I would definitely recommend you to pick this up. You are in for a really nice traditional fantasy story, bit of time travel, bit of emotion, some romance, not for Elliot, but there's a core of that, and the actual ending itself. And this is something I'll mention again. It's got a couple of fake out endings which are a bit annoying, but if you get past them and get to the really true ending, it's pretty satisfying. So yeah, definitely worth the journey.
Cool. Okay, we're going to move on to the discussion question now, which is going to be a little bit different today because I wanted to ask Paul something, which is, hey, Paul, you went to a concert the other night, didn't you?
I did, yes.
What concert was it?
It was the Persona Grooves concert in London, which was part of an entire days worth of events, but I sort of attended the second half of it, a couple of panels beforehand, and yeah, it was apparently from what I was advised at the event, Shoji Megura's first European performance, so I feel really privileged to have been able to attend that.
That's awesome. What did they play? I mean, it was Persona, but...
It was Persona, yeah. It was a music of Persona 3, 4, and 5. And we had some stuff that you would imagine, really. We had, lots of Persona 5 hits, like Last Surprise, and Wake Up, things like that. A couple of pieces from 3 and 4 as well, but yeah, really heavy on the 5. There was the way they performed it was they had half an orchestra ensemble, an orchestra that they've actually been using because it's called the Game Music Festival. They've been doing multiple video games over the last few weeks or couple of months, and they had the same orchestra ensemble that they've used for most of the days, but kind of like a smaller part of that, accompanied with a jazz troupe, a choir, and then 2 really amazing vocalists bringing the whole thing to life. And it was an absolutely mind-blowing experience. And to see Shoji Bigger on guitar for the majority of the performance, which I thought was just such an impressive that he involved himself to that degree very well as well. He's a good guitarist, luckily. The atmosphere there, everyone was having a great time, and really, really, what I didn't expect as well was the amount of effort that went into the arrangements. Much bigger and much more involved than just the bass soundtrack that you would hear normally, with many saxophone solos, guitar solos, really just bringing the whole thing to life. And it was quite an experience for me to hear some of these things for the first time. Some of these things I've been listening to for so many years. Really blew me away.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for giving us that report. And I am going to, can I transition that? A more logical place would be to transition that and talking about Rhythm Encounter, but that comes later. So I will just do a very awkward transition into talking about ways you can support us here. Hey, did they have any merch at this show, Paul?
Did they have any merch? They did, but I did not see it because the queue for the merchandise was insanely long. It was really, really huge. It was the first thing I saw when I arrived, and I thought, as much as I would love to have taken some of those things home, and I'm sure my partner would have loved it if I'd got some of it as well. I'm afraid I failed as a Persona fan because I did not want to queue for an hour to get any of it. But kudos to those who did. There were a lot of people who were queuing up for that stuff, and I'm sure it was fantastic.
Well, you know where you don't need to queue up for merchandise? www.rpgfan.com/shop. Oh boy, that was a long journey to get there. Yes, so we have a store, as everyone knows, and you can check it out there. Another way you can support us here at RPG Fan is you can check out our past episodes of Random Encounter. Our last episode was our annual Naughty 3 extravaganza. So if you missed any of the big announcements during that week, and there were a lot of announcements, check that out. We also have Retro Encounter. There is now a 2-parter focused on the 2005 action RPG Xanadu Next, and that was a Windows and N-Gage exclusive. And if you don't know what an N-Gage is, then you have your 20s and possibly your 30s to look forward to. You can also check out Rhythm Encounter, which is still on hiatus, but there are about 200 episodes that have aired. So if you want to listen to some fantastic RPG music, check those out. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can do so at podcast@rpgfan.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for discussion questions or anything like that, fire it off to me. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at my email, jlogan@rpgfan.com, and you can also find me at Blue Sky at johnologan.bluesky.social. Aleks, where can we find you online?
You can just email me at alexfranachek@gmail.com.
Cool. And Paul?
I am Paul Skemmington on Blue Sky, and I'm Lord Spiral on the Discord.
Awesome. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends to help us get the word out there. And you can also rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Aleks, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it's been great. Thanks a lot.
And everyone out there, thank you very much for joining us. And whatever you're playing, have fun.